Well, good morning. So glad everyone's here today. Welcome to Coffee and Quality, our March session. Again, please share your name and agency in the chat. Would love to say welcome through our chat feature. And for those of you that have been to many of our Coffee and Qualities, welcome back. And if today is your first Coffee and Quality, welcome. We are so glad you're here. So for Coffee and Quality, it's really a community where we get to hear from each other, learn from one another, and we have some really simple ground rules. So our first ground rule is this is a safe space to share and learn. So it's okay to share open and honestly and be respectful with one another. And then, this is also an opportunity for you to share your experience, your perceptions, your knowledge. So feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along or to unmute and ask a question. And as this is a virtual space, as we kind of get into any kind of interaction or engagement, it's all, if we call on someone, it's definitely an invitation, not an obligation. We just want this to be a welcoming virtual space as if we were all at United Way of Greater Houston in our maybe room together in person while we're still living in this COVID time. We're virtual. So those are our ground rules. Thank you. Thank you all. And just a reminder, we have a Teams channel where you can get more resources after the session. We also post additional resources, meetings, workshops that kind of come up throughout the weeks, throughout the months on our Teams channel. So if you're not a member of the Teams channel, just send me an email and I'll make sure you get access to our Teams channel. It's for all of our funded partners and non-funded partners. So it's definitely a place to share resources and communicate in between sessions. Or you can just drop your name and email in the chat and I'll make sure to pick that up and get you logged into the Teams channel. So with that, those are my top of the session announcements. And today I am very excited for our presentation. So I first learned of Families Empowered and their use of micro surveys through Good Measure and Mission Capital's 2020 Data Institute. So our guest speaker today is Ayla Degenpour. She is the Director of Marketing and Communications at Families Empowered, where she works to listen to, talk with, and elevate parent voices across Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. She joined the workforce at the Houston area sports nonprofit, after which she spent much of her career as an editor at a local lifestyle publishing house. She earned her bachelor's at the University of Houston before completing her master's at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Through her time at Families Empowered, she has championed their micro survey work and innovative marketing strategies. So please give a warm welcome to Ayla, and I am going to stop sharing screen and hand it over to her.
Yes, well, thank you, Jessica, for that very warm welcome. I am going to go ahead and launch into this presentation because there's a lot and it's very interactive. So I'm hoping that y'all will enthusiastically join me on this. So today we're going to talk about the impact of microsurveys on long-term goals and how at Families Empowered we have used these throughout the years. So a little bit about me, as Jessica mentioned, I am the Director of Marketing and Communications at Families Empowered. I talk to parents, that's what I do, and it is great. I love it, and it is so much fun. But let's talk about Families Empowered a little bit more, just in case anybody is not familiar with us. I was really excited in the chat to see a lot of organizations we've worked with before. So I know that some of you know us already, but for anyone who doesn't, hello. At Families Empowered, we're a community-based women and minority-led nonprofit parent service organization. Our goal is that one day all families will have access to schools that work for them. That means all schools for us. We passionately believe in public schools, traditional ISD magnet programs, public charter schools, private schools, micro schools, homeschooling, just to name a few. There are lots of options out there, and we want parents to have access to all of them. Our leadership team is comprised of multiple first-generation college graduates and parents themselves. And so we deeply understand the importance of empowering families and the positive impact that they can have on our communities once they have the resources and information that they need. And so each year we reach out to tens of thousands of families in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. Of course, we have been around for about 11 years. And over the years, we have served a little bit more than 103,000 families statewide. And so we do this in a few different ways, but it is all centered around providing free personalized service to any parent that needs our help. And so, a few of the ways that we do this, we do it in a lot of different ways, but a few of the main ways that we do this is through in person events where we're able to bring schools and parents together to talk about their enrollment options, to talk about their school options. And then we're, of course, always on site to help them fill out those applications once they've found a school that works for them. This picture here is of our awesome CEO, Colleen Dipple, who I am sure many of you know, at the drive-through event we hosted this year, because just like the rest of you, we had to pivot our in-person events like crazy. And so we actually hosted this drive-through event in partnership with Baker Ripley, who I believe is here today. So shout out to Baker Ripley and thank you again for hosting us for this event. It was really wonderful. And we also had lots of schools on site to help parents and talk to them about all of their different options, including the HISD Office of School Choice and some of our Apply Houston partners. So that's how we're kind of handling our in-person events this year. Hopefully one day soon we will get back to doing some normal in-person events. So another way that we complete our work is through digital events. All of us are in the same boat when it comes to digital events, I think. And so all year long, starting in April of last year, we have been hosting digital events for parents to help them meet schools and navigate the application process, especially now that everything's kind of wonky with what's going on with COVID right now. So we very much so like to connect parents with the actual people that they'll be working with in the school. That means teachers, principals, other parents, students in some cases. We host a live video series on Facebook. And then this year, we also got to host 3 cornerstone events, which were virtual school fairs, one in each of our cities. And we had lots and lots of people, over 3,000 people engage with those. And this is one of our awesome San Antonio parents who was actually attending the fair. So that's the picture that you see there. And then finally, one of our other main ways that we support families in understanding and navigating all of their school options is through our full-time bilingual call center. And so this is Pam. If you call in, you will either get to talk to Pam, Allison, or Leah. They are awesome. And all they do is help parents. They answer every question they could have. They do it for free. It's completely one-on-one. And then they also help to elevate all of those parent stories that they hear day in and day out. So any day of the week, all year long, you call in, you're going to get to talk to one of them and get personalized one-on-one help. So that's us. Those are some of the main ways that we complete our work. We also have some digital tools that make finding and applying to schools easier. We have familiesempowered.org, which is our website where you can get answers to just basic school option information. We also have some resources pages up there. We've got a COVID-19 resources page that directs families directly to their schools so that they can find out what's going on in terms of, are we hybrid today? Are we back in person? All of that kind of fun stuff. And then we also have information about the things that our families need, which are things like where rental assistance is available, where utility assistance is available, access to devices, things like that. And we actually found out what to put on that page based on a micro survey. So I'm really excited to talk about that today and how we got there. We also have 3 projects that we call them our applies. They are Apply Austin, Apply Houston, and Apply San Antonio. Apply Austin and Apply San Antonio make it super easy for families to find and apply to schools. You go to the one website, you can find multiple schools, all of their applications, click through all their dates. It's all in one place so that families don't have to run around trying to track all that info down themselves. And then Apply Houston is a shared application. So just one step further, it means that parents just have to fill out one application and they can use that one application to apply to multiple schools. And these all encompass all school types. We have public schools as well as private schools because we always want to make sure that families have access to all of their school options because it's all about what works for them. So, what does that mean? Just overall, what have we done this year? Here are some quick stats for everyone, just to give you an idea of some of the ways that we've pivoted during the pandemic. Like most of you, we kind of had to change up our work and make sure we were meeting the need where it was. And so that COVID-19 resource page has been great. As I mentioned, we've had almost 4,000 virtual school fair users across all three cities. We were also very lucky to be able to give out $50,000 in cash assistance directly to families at the beginning of the pandemic when there were concerns about being able to pay for rent and buy groceries and things like that. And we've reached more than 3 million people over the past year through our digital campaigns on social media, which includes that live video series that I mentioned. All of this is to say that we have been able to provide uninterrupted service to parents throughout the pandemic, not only in informing them about all of their school options, especially as things were changing so rapidly with school, but also in providing them resources for virtual learning support. And so that is us. And now we get into the meat of the presentation. Very excited to take a survey. So, what I'd like to do is have you all take a survey right now. What we're going to do today is take a survey, look at that data, and create a one pager all within this 90 minutes. That's how easy and quick these micro surveys can be. So, in the chat, I am going to put a link to a survey. If you would all click through, take that survey. It's super quick because it's a micro survey. While we talk about the different elements of a micro survey. So there's that link in the chat. Please do click through, answer it real quick for me. And in the meantime, while everyone is doing that, let's talk about the elements of a micro survey. And just sort of the background of a micro survey at Families Empowered. Our first micro survey was launched as kind of a quick way to learn a little bit more about the type of content that families wanted to see in our email newsletters. I actually personally launched our first micro survey, so it has been a very wild ride seeing how all of this has changed and evolved over the years. Once we found out, hey, we can use this data to actually inform our work in real time, we realized that using microsurveys as a regular tool helped us to measure parent interest surrounding a variety of topics, not just communications related topics. And we could use those findings to pivot our work to meet immediate needs. And so, all of that being said, in-depth scientific annual and quarterly data collection is still a really important part of our work. We still, of course, do that, all of those sort of traditional big old data reports that we're all used to. But that being said, we understand at Families Empowered that we can't expect to serve people based on data that only comes to us a few times a year. And that's particularly important in the current climate that we're living in with the pandemic and everything that's changing so quickly. And so through these micro surveys, we have been able to tune into real-time struggles and concerns of the tens of thousands of families that we serve. And not only has this helped us to better understand their needs in a more direct way, but it's also helped us to very quickly provide more tailored solutions and get the resources into the hands of our family success specialists to give directly to those parents right away as they need them. And so, as we have kind of continued to collect this data from micro surveys, it kind of freed us from publishing those big, thick, dense data reports that we're all used to, because it allows us to share impactful, easy to understand data in something that's really pretty and eye-catching that resonates with supporters and also just with your community in general. And it's great for funders too, we have found. So, what that has done is it really transforms those numbers on a page to an actual engaging story of the real needs of Texas families. All of this did not happen overnight. As I mentioned, we launched our first one almost 3 years ago now, and it has changed and evolved. And so I am very excited to share with you guys what our best practices have become. Some of that has even changed during the pandemic as we evolve with our families. So this is very up to date and timely, I think. So I think by now most people have taken the survey. If you haven't yet, please do continue to click through. I'm going to talk a little bit about the elements of a microsurvey now that you've all experienced one as a user. So, there are three main things to consider when building a microsurvey. The first thing you want to think about is how you're going to deliver that survey. And so, this one, unfortunately or fortunately, is not a one size fits all element of a microsurvey. And so, really, the aim of these surveys is to inform your organization about your current audience's needs so that you can pivot your programming to meet those needs. So, that means that the best delivery method is going to be rooted in your organization's communications with the community that you serve. For us at Families Empowered, our best tool, number one tool, is our email newsletter. We've spent 11 years building this newsletter. People use it, they trust it. And so for us, that's kind of a fail proof when we go to distribute these surveys is our newsletter. That being said, social also has become really important for us in terms of getting these surveys out. And in the past couple of years, so this is like a brand new one, text messaging has been huge in getting these surveys out. It's really easy to send them out, send a text message that says, hey, do you have a few minutes to tell us about XYZ? Here's the link. And so that's been a really great tool for us at Families Empowered to get these surveys out. But that being said, that will change based on how you communicate with your community right now. And for those of you that don't necessarily have established regular communications with your audience, that's okay. These will still work. What I definitely recommend doing is networking with your partners in the community and have them distribute your survey on your behalf. Not only does this strengthen your relationship with them and you can kind of tweak those questions so that it's informing both your work and the partner's work, but it also connects you with the audience that you serve when you haven't quite established a communication channel yet. So that's a really great way to get these out if you don't have an established communication method yet. So those are kind of some key points to take away when you're thinking about, okay, I have a micro survey. How am I going to get it out? Second thing you want to think about is how long your survey should be open. These micro surveys work so well because they're timely. And so that's why the data is so impactful. So keeping the duration of the survey as short as possible while also keeping it in alignment with your programmatic goals is key to making a micro survey work. In today's climate with the pandemic, this is particularly important because the world is changing so fast. New information is being hurled at people by the minute. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it seems like every time my phone pings, it's because there's some new policy in place or something has changed or there are new numbers for this or that. The same thing is happening to families, which is who we serve, but the same thing is happening to all constituents, not only in Texas, but across the country. And so that means that their opinions are also evolving and changing based on their situation, which unfortunately for most Texas families is in a state of flux. We had a crisis with the pandemic and housing security before the winter storm. And now we have families who don't have water in their house still and things like that. So there's just this state of upheaval that we're in right now. And so having timely data is really important in pivoting your work to make sure that you're meeting those needs. So, what we have figured out is that we about 14 days is right for the pandemic right now, but we typically keep them open from 14 to 30 days. That keeps you really timely with your data, keeps you on point. The longer running surveys are really useful, particularly if you have a sample size in mind. And so kind of basing your goal sample size off of how long you're going to run your survey is a great way to decide if you're going to do 14, 15, 30 days. So definitely keeping that audience response in mind is a good place to start when it comes to duration. So the third, final, and probably most confusing element of a micro survey that you have to consider when you're building one of these are the questions. As you all saw, since you participated in this micro survey that we took today, they're short. They're just that. At Families Empowered, we have learned that limiting it to about 3 questions is just right. That's the sweet spot. We also tend to avoid writing questions or short paragraph questions because it all comes down to respecting your audience's time, respecting their time. They're busy just like you and I. And if you think about your own habits when you're entering a giveaway or filling out something like a customer satisfaction survey, how do you behave? If you click a link to a survey or a response form and you see that you need to scroll through about 5 pages worth of questions, how likely are you to actually fill it out? Probably not likely. And for that short paragraph, you're probably just going to put an asterisk or a 1, 2, 3 or something to get out of that field. And so, in order to make the data really accurate, make it easy for parents to fill out, we keep it short. No more than 3. That's about right. It means that they don't really have to scroll on their phone. Most of our users come to us and use digital devices. So we just try and make it as easy and quick as possible because we know that all of our constituents are just as busy as everyone else. So another thing to think about besides the length of the survey when you're formulating your questions is the phrasing of your questions, making it easy to understand and a little bit less scientific, which is a trap that I think we all tend to fall into as we try and use, really high level language or language that seems pedestrian to us as nonprofit professionals, but is not so easily understandable in a everyday setting for somebody that's not in this field. So, thinking about your phrasing, making it accessible, and then also thinking about the average reading level of your audience is a really great way to come at writing questions. So at Families Empowered, we try as much as we can to stay at about a 3rd grade reading level when we're phrasing questions for our constituents. That took a lot of testing, a lot of back and forth. And so if you are not quite there yet, that's totally okay. You can get there. One of the ways I like to suggest to do that is to do A/B testing with your newsletters if you have newsletters. And so that would be sending out one newsletter with one set of content and phrasing, and then another newsletter with that same stuff just phrased differently at a different reading level, and then seeing which performs best. That's kind of how you can get started on finding that reading level if you don't yet know it. But really just keeping in mind, I need to keep this accessible. Maybe I know at Families Empowered, we sometimes have like our spouses review it and say, hey, does this make sense to you? That's another really quick, great way to make sure that you're phrasing things that make sense. And so finally, how do you get all the data that you need from your constituents in only 3 questions? It's really hard because we are all in the business of listening to our communities and working for them. So naturally, we have about 1 million questions we could ask them. We could sit down with them for hours and still not be done asking them questions. But what I like to do in the way that I build micro surveys is I start with an end objective. Literally the first place I start is, what is my CEO going to ask me about this data when I present it to her at the end? That's where I start. And so starting with an end objective and being able to answer questions that are going to come in from your team members or your funders is a really great place to be able to pare down to the core components of what you need to learn. And so, I will share with you guys an example of one of our micro surveys that ended up being used a lot and kind of how we formulated into 3 short questions. We framed the problem, we found out what factors went into that problem, and then we framed a possible solution to see if we were on the right track. And so that gave us the ability to disseminate out that information to all of our partners, our team members, and our funders. And so for that, this was a survey. We were looking at whether or not parents had any interest in private schools. We were not trying to push them towards private schools. We were not trying to change their minds about anything. We just wanted to know, is this something you're interested in? Should we keep giving you this info? So first question we asked was, of course, have you thought about enrolling your kids? Have you ever even thought about it? As you can see, over a lot of people said no, like about half. And so we followed that question up with, if not, Why? And we gave them a few simple choices so that they didn't have to think too hard or give us some long, drawn out explanation. We just said, why? What's the most prevalent thing that comes to your mind when you think about private schools? Overwhelmingly, they said too expensive, which of course is such a common concern when it comes to private school. We're all used to that sort of, you think of private school as being very elite. And so the next question we asked them was, if you knew more about financial aid or assistance with tuition, would that change your mind? Overwhelmingly, again, they said, yes, that would change my mind. I might consider a private school. And so, what we were able to do with this is go back to schools and say, hey, we know that lots of you have really vibrant financial aid packages, but families don't know about them. So, we were able to actually share with schools that they needed to start sharing that information more widely with families to make their school a more equitable option for families that needed that financial assistance. We also were able to just compile all that financial aid info for ourselves so that our family success specialists could share it with families right away, so that those families really felt like they truly had access to every type of school. So, really, the overall goal here was, what's the problem? What goes into that problem? And what's a possible solution? And that's kind of how we got to those three questions. It does take practice. It is not the easiest thing in the world to automatically get to, paring it down to three things. But, we collaborate a lot at Families Empowered. And I really do encourage that when you're building your own surveys, is to ask your teammates, ask your team members, ask community partners. For us, we sometimes ask schools. And so it looks like we've got a great question in the chat about, it looks like Mr. Scott is asking, how long did it take to compile the information and take action on the micro survey? It was really fast. And we're going to do that in today's session. The nice thing, we always use Google Forms. And so the nice thing about Google Forms is it spits these pie charts out to you. We always do go through and analyze line by line to make sure there are no sort of like fake responses where somebody's put in, like John Smith and my phone number is 12345 so that we can pull those out of the sample so that we're not diluting the sample size. But it's really fast. So when we initially distributed this particular survey, we literally took these pie charts after we had pulled out the fakes and put them onto a sheet and shared it out that way. It literally took less than a week to disseminate it out to people. And we left this survey open for a month, so for 30 days. So from start to finish, this was about a month and a half long process. And our team, I shout out to them. I know a few of them are here today, are go-getters, and they immediately took this data and ran with it and gave it to funders and gave it to schools and started having those conversations pretty much as soon as we had it. So it's pretty fast, about a month and a half in total for the project. So before we look at our data that we collected from the survey that you all filled out just now, I do want to break and see if there are any other questions about the elements of a survey or any of the other pieces of microsurveys that we've talked about so far. I'll give a little break there in the chat. If you've got something, please throw it in there. Okay, I'm going to hop over to our responses. If you do think of something, if you're still typing, I will definitely still answer. Don't think you have lost your chance. So this is what that survey that you all just took looks like on the admin side. So you got to experience it as a user, and now we're going to look at it as the admin, which is us. So you can see your questions. This is where you can change your options. Using Google Forms is really easy. We also love Google Forms not only because it's easy and free and therefore very budget friendly, but also because it's super collaborative. You can add your teammates as admins to your survey. And so you can work on the questions and get them to where they need to be in a collaborative way with the rest of your team. And it really makes forming those questions into something shorter and more digestible a lot easier when you have input from others. So we love Google Forms for this. It's super easy. If you go to forms.google.com, that's where you can start building your very first Google form. And that's where you start with a title and demographic options. So Stephanie has a great question that really feeds into this, that we collect name and phone number and do. She's wondering if we ever collect any other type of contact or demographic info in our micro surveys. So yes, sometimes, particularly when we are giving out a prize, we will sometimes ask for their address because we'll need to have it on file anyways. We also, if we're trying to look at something that's particularly geographic, we ask for zip codes so that we can figure out where in Houston each person who's answering is, so that we know, okay, there's a particular need in 77004, right? For example. And we can look at their responses based on their zip code. That's a big one for us. We love asking for zip code. It's one of our bigger ones. That being said, we typically don't ask for demographic info such as race or sex or household income in a micro survey, because we have found that families are less likely to share that information with us in a digital survey like this. We do demographic surveying over the phone, and we talk to people one-on-one to get that kind of information. We also don't want there to ever be a situation where potentially that kind of sensitive information could be compromised. At Families Empowered, we use G Suite, so all of our Google stuff is very, very secure. But we still want to be careful as the shepherds of information for people. And so Erica had a question about Google Forms using the survey. Yes, Google Forms is where the survey is hosted. It'll live there forever. If you looked at my Google Forms drive, it's like pages and pages worth of surveys. They never go away. You can close them and open them so that they're public or not public, and it all lives in the same place. So it's really nice to be able to keep everything together. So from here, this is what it looks like when you change your questions. You just tap in, you can choose the type of question you want to ask, and then you phrase it yourself. One thing that was not done on today's survey is that typically for Families Empowered, we always include both Spanish and English, because about 60% of our families are Spanish speakers. So it's really, really important to us to provide every single thing that we do in both Spanish and English. And that likewise is really easy to do in Google Forms. We have done it a couple different ways, and so one way that we do it is we have separate surveys. We have a survey in English that goes out to the families that we know have selected English as their preferred language. And then we have a separate survey that is in Spanish entirely that goes out to those families that have selected Spanish as their preferred language. But my favorite way to do it is to include the Spanish and English in the same survey. So literally what we do is go in, edit it, put a cross section, and then type the Spanish. And we do the same thing with all of the answers, so it's very bilingual for anyone that needs it. Now we're ready to look at the responses. So a really great spread of responses. I love how many people said monthly. That's awesome. But we still have a pretty big chunk, a little less than half, that say you only survey your community annually. I hope that utilizing microsurveys will help you with that. So this is one way to sort of increase those numbers. We also asked you how many questions you usually ask. Looks like most of you said too many, which is a really common trap to fall into. We ourselves, it takes us, I would say, probably a week or two to get down to 3 questions still to this day. So that is not shameful in the least, I would say. And then we, of course, asked you all how often you share your data. And it looks like a lot of you, and my guess is probably the people that survey monthly also share monthly. I could go in and look line by line, but that's going to be my guess when I just glance at this. And so that being said, a pretty good chunk said either annually or only when a funder asks. And the reason we put that option is because that used to be us too. So we are on the same board. And so Sheena had a question. She's curious to know what was the reason that we said we don't ask open-ended questions on a survey. And that is simply because we found over the years of doing them, people are less likely to fill it out. They'll put like a space or an asterisk or a 1, 2, 3. And so we start with these very simple quantitative questions. And then a little later in the presentation, I'll talk about how we follow up with them to get that more qualitative data, because that is a piece of it for sure. So this is what our data looks like. Again, you can literally just snapshot these pie charts and people love them. You can also, I did mention we do some analysis. So you click individual and then you can go through line by line and you can see if there are any fakes, right? Somebody who said like John Smith, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And you can pull out all of those ones that you can't identify as a real person. We luckily over the years have not had any problems with bots filling out our surveys. In the past 3 years of doing these, that just has not happened. So these are pretty secure in terms of you're not going to get a ton of like bot activity like you would with like a newsletter form or something like that. So you can go through individually and click through and kind of see who has said what. This is also a great way to check and see if there's a need in a particular part of the community if you've asked for zip code. You can also go question by question. So you can see how many people answered which question. And then this little button right here is the golden egg within Google Forms. You click create spreadsheet. It'll create a new spreadsheet for you. And then you can download this and you can do some really in-depth analysis, particularly if you've collected zip code, or if you're asking questions like rate on a scale of 1 to 5, and then you want to contact all the people that rated whatever you asked as a 5, right? The most intense. You can sort it, very easily pull those people out and contact them separately. So the spreadsheet feature is a really, really nice feature of Google Forms that we utilize a lot. You can also download, import it into your database, whichever database you use. It is very flexible. So any other questions about Google Forms before we kind of move on to a bonus element that I talked about a little earlier? Okay, well, again, don't think you've missed your chance. If you think of something, please throw it in the chat. Our little bonus element is we include raffle prizes. So our surveys almost always include raffle prizes. It is very rare that we have a survey where we do not say, fill out this survey for a chance to win a $25 HEB gift card or something similar. It encourages participation. And so we have received these through in-kind donations. Our development team coordinates those. They do an amazing job. It is a tough thing to build up. When we first started doing this, it took a while for them to build up sort of like our in-kind network. And now that it's in place, we kind of give them a wish list. I would say probably a few times a year and say, hey, we're going to need this. We definitely do give them heads up. So if you're thinking about incorporating this from the in-kind side of things, just remember it is a big ask of your development team. So do give them as much lead time as possible. But when you're doing this, you can also just buy a gift card. We do that sometimes too, particularly when we're giving out HEB gift cards, because honestly, we give them out faster than we can even get them into the office. That's a big one for families. But a best practice here is to ask for a selfie, right? When you mail it to them, put in the card, hey, can you take a picture with your gift card or at the restaurant or whatever it is? Not only does it show other people, hey, I could actually win, but it's a really great way to give back to those in-kind sponsors and to say, hey, look at this really cute family that showed up to your restaurant and they were so happy. And it's just a nice, heartwarming way to actually see your constituents in real life when we can't really see them in real life. At least you're seeing pictures right now. Yeah, I see a comment in the chat about the spin wheel. People love the spin wheel. We used to have in-person events and we would have a spin wheel. And even after we had run out of things, people would say, can I spin it anyways? People love the spin wheel. So if you're thinking about incorporating a spin wheel, either virtually or in person, I cannot recommend it enough. That is a really great point. So Any other questions about sort of the micro survey side of things, building it, pulling out the data, before we move on to presenting? Okay, I see a great question from Erica. We do not, because they send it to us. So at that point, they are giving us permission to use the photo. We always, in our wording, when we ask them for a photo, say, can you send us a photo that we can post, that we can share? So that then when they reply with the photo, we are good to go. If we're doing this at an in-person event, which this doesn't have anything to do with a micro survey, but I do always get waivers. I am like obsessed with the photo release. I'm sure it drives my team insane. But yeah, best practice is if you're doing it in person with the spin wheel or whatever, get them to just sign a quick release. If you're just sending them something and asking them to give you a photo in return, make sure in your wording, when you phrase it, you are saying, you are being very explicit about what you're going to use that photo for, so that when they send it to you, they are agreeing to that usage. And then just remember not to use it in any way other than what you've told them you will use it. That, other than from a legal standpoint, that's also just in order to keep trust with your constituents, that you're not going to take something and do differently than what you said. Okay. Any other questions? Like I said, throw them in the chat as you get them. But let's talk about actually sharing the data. So now you have all this great data. You're doing it regularly. At Families Empowered, we do it every other month. And you've got this really timely, impactful data. You should probably share it out. And I am definitely looking at those of you who said annually or only when a funder asks, because I get it. It is tough taking all that data, and then you've analyzed it, and now you have to put it into some beautiful report. It's really overwhelming. It takes a long time. Part of the reason that we like the micro surveys so much is that we don't have to put together these multi-page reports. In lots of cases, we used to outsource those types of reports to a contractor, so it also wasn't super budget friendly. With the micro surveys, we're able to create these one-pagers full of impactful data in-house, which makes it a lot more budget friendly, but it also makes it a lot faster because there's not a review process and you go back and forth with the contractor. So that's one of the nice things about these micro surveys, is because they're so short, they're so easy to share out. So there are lots of different ways that you can sort of graphically share this information. I've listed a bunch at the bottom of this slide, and we'll be sharing these slides after the session, of course. But some of the main ones that I want to talk about are canva.com, Adobe programs, and then Microsoft programs, as well as Google Docs and Slides, which, those two, you can kind of, if you know how to use Microsoft Word, you're pretty good with Google Docs, most likely. So these examples that you're looking at on the page were all created in-house with one of these programs. We did all of this ourselves, and we did it fast. Typically, from the time that we create the survey, or that we have the data, to the time that we're able to release the data, it's about a week. And that's just an internal review process, making sure everybody's looking at the data and understands it and things like that. So Amanda, great question. We at Families Empowered have gotten, so Amanda's question, for anyone not looking at the chat, if you're on your phone, she is curious to know how often we send out surveys, and if we're sending the surveys to the same clients, and if so, do they get weary or overwhelmed with the surveys? This is a great question. We send at Families Empowered, we're in kind of a groove now. We send them out every other month. So we send out 6 a year. And we promote the surveys to our database of families, which does change throughout the year. Of course, there's an ebb and flow. Some people's kids age out and they say, hey, I don't need your help anymore because my kids have all graduated. And then we also throughout the year get new parents. So it ebbs and flows. But yes, for the most part, the bulk of our constituents stay the same, right? Because they're going from 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, right? And so because these surveys are so short and sweet, we have not had a problem with getting consistent sample sizes. People continue to fill them out for us, particularly because we do switch around the topics. And so some one group of our database may fill out one survey and not fill out another, but that means a different group is filling out the other because we switch up the topics and make sure that we're talking about different things. So for us, that often means different things that apply to different grade levels or different types of schools or different types of communication preferences. For other organizations, this can mean different things. Just thinking in the space of right now, we're working on pre-K. We're working on pre-K and kinder enrollment and understanding that. So, if that was all we did, which it is not, you could change up your topics to ask about how much a free program impacts your decision on whether or not to enroll. Or you could ask, do you need half day or full day? Or, does an ESL or a dual language program, right? Like you can change it up based on what type of programming you specifically offer, and it keeps your constituents engaged. Is there a sample? So Erica's curious to know, is there a sample size that we get where we decide not to share the data? That's a really good question. That has not happened to us yet because when we get a really low sample size, we will either extend out the survey and do a little bit more marketing around it. We'll maybe add an additional prize. We'll bring in a community partner to help us share it out. We will utilize kind of all of those other channels that we have to get it out there to the community, and then just extend it by a week or two and see if that helps out our sample size. Another thing that sometimes happens when we get really low response rates is because our survey has accidentally coincided with some sort of major event. So for example, our pre-K survey, the last week of it happened to be the week of the winter storm, and that was awful because nobody was online filling out a survey. So we relaunch surveys sometimes. And so that's kind of how we keep our sample sizes strong enough to share the data. Of course, if it's just completely inconsequential, we feel like we're not actually going to be representing the voices of the people, we will not release the data and we'll try again. Because, of course, we want to make sure that we're representing all of our families when we share this data. So, good response rate. It always helps to start with a sample size that you have in mind. If this is the first time that you are really surveying your constituents, you can probably expect a lower response rate. For us, a representative sample size is anywhere between 200 and 500 for our community. That is a representative sample size. So it's really going to be dependent on your constituents. So, what you really want to be doing is making sure that the people who have filled out your survey are diverse enough to be representative of the community that you plan to speak for. Because at the point that you're releasing this data, you are speaking for them, you are sharing their thoughts and opinions. So when looking at your sample size, you want to make sure it's large enough that it's equitable, that it's diverse, and that it's including all of the different types of voices that exist within your community. And so that's one of the things when you go to that Google form and you go line by line and just check them. That's one of the things we like to do, is because most of the people that fill out our surveys, they are also in our database. So we have some additional info about them already. We're able to go in and see, like, okay, was this a Spanish speaker that filled out somebody who had identified their language as preferred Spanish? We're able to look at that and make sure that we get a really diverse mix. So I would say, in addition to making sure that your sample is large enough to represent your overall community, you also want to make sure that it's diverse enough to represent your whole community, whatever that means to you. If you serve, we always want to make sure we're elevating our Spanish speaking families and our immigrant families. So that's one of the things that we look for to make sure we have good response rate. Okay, so any other questions? Keep throwing them in the chat. Love all these questions. So what we're going to do today, all of these, like I said, were created in-house. Canva.com is a really great one. It can be free. You can also upgrade it, but it's really intuitive and user friendly. And in your handout, which I think Jessica threw in the chat, but I believe everyone will get a copy of it after this session as well, there's a link to a Canva template that I created for y'all so that you can get started. We're going to use that today. It's so user friendly. It's also cloud based, which means you can share it with your colleagues and you can say, hey, here's what I have so far. Feel free to tweak. And you don't have to kind of be going back and forth and you're the only one that utilizes it. Yeah, Adriana, great tip. So nonprofits can get Canva Pro for free. Looks like we have a few Canva users online today, which is awesome. So what you're looking at right now on the screen, about half of these were created in Canva and the other half were created in one of these other programs down here at the bottom. But you can absolutely create beautiful content without having something professional like Adobe Photoshop or InDesign. That is not a requirement by any means. So let's actually make this data shareable. And so here's the template. This is what that link will look like when you click it. Again, it's in your handout. As I mentioned, one thing to remember, Canva is cloud-based. So anytime anyone has the link to your original Canva document you're working on, they can edit and change and see all the changes you're making. So just keep that in mind. However, when you use a template, it's going to make a copy of this template that I've created. So you don't have to worry about all that. It will just go into your account. So you'll just click use this template and you can upload things like logos. You can upload even a brand kit. Like at Families Empowered, we have our brand fonts uploaded into Canva. So you can keep everything all in one place. You don't have to dig through your Dropbox or all your files to find your logos. And so when you're making something shareable, your title should always be as eye-catching as possible. Basically, you want to tell them why they should care. So for our title, we can say something along the lines of, how often are Houston nonprofits talking to their communities? And then it's super user friendly because you can drag things, delete things, move them around, just kind of, and it's very visual. So you don't really have to be concerned about, well, I don't know how many pixels I should move these or how exactly big the ratio should be. And so when you're framing your data, in this template, I've included 6 places for you to share data just in case you have a lot of stuff to share out or you are doing something along the lines of like releasing 2 surveys at once, that kind of thing. But for our purposes, we asked 3 questions. So you always want to make sure people know what you asked and then what your constituents said. So for us, we asked you, how many times do and then you literally all you have to do is put the percentage in. So for y'all, what that was is we can say 52% said annually or never. So what we like to do is kind of like frame the problem here. And so that's what we're doing, is that we're framing an opportunity for improvement. So we can say 52%, of course, you'll want to do the real math, said annually or, and the nice thing about this is you can always switch back and forth, annually or never, right? And so using the exact same language keeps it very clear so that you're not sort of like diluting your data or trying to suggest something that your constituents didn't say to you. So you definitely always want to use as close to your original language as possible while still framing it for the people that are going to be consuming this information. And so by making your percentage a little bit bigger, a little bit more bold, it's eye-catching. Somebody looks at this and they say, wait, 52% of what said what? And then they'll read a little bit further in. You can also swap out logos. So like for our purposes, we can add United Way's logo here. So you literally just like click, you can drag. It is super easy to do. And so you guys can use this template. You can change up the colors, anything that's you just click on it, click the color, put in your brand colors, make it yours, move things around, get creative with it. Super intuitive and easy to use. When you're utilizing Canva Pro, which as nonprofits, you guys can all sign up for, which is such a great tip. You can access photos. So you can use stock photos that they have, and anything that has this little pro crown, you get to use it for free. So you're a little bit less limited. They have stock photos. There are design elements. You can change things out. It really is super user friendly. There are even templates if you need to get started. One little tip that I like to say is just because it's not a data template doesn't mean it can't be used as a data template. So if you look at something and you say, okay, look, this looks awesome. Look at what an eye-catching title that is. And then here's a place where I can put data. Awesome, use it. So we have a question in the chat about getting the photo colors to show up. Once you drag in these are just stock photos that we pulled from Canva. Canva will automatically pull that up because they are photos that were within Canva already. So Canva already has them in their database. So because these are Canva stock photos, it pulled them in for us and it can see so for anybody who's looking up here, you can see the document colors. So these are all the colors that are in the document, which happen to be Families Empowered's brand colors. And then right underneath, you can mimic the photos or the colors that are in the photos that you've used. And so if you upload a photo, which would be here, it will go ahead and do that for you. Like let's add, this is Deanna. I think she's on this call today, and her son Rush. So thank you guys. You can see it will eventually pull her in, just not right away. So if we click see all, she's down there at the bottom. So if you've got a lot of different things, you can see all of the different colors. And that's kind of one of the ways too, if you're bringing in your logo and you don't know off the top of your head your brand colors, what exactly those numbers are. If you pull your logo in, you do have to upload it here. But if you pull your logo in, all of a sudden right here, we have all of United Way's colors, even though they are not in our brand folder. So you definitely do have to upload it first. That's just kind of the trick there. The process of getting Canva Pro free for nonprofits, you would do that through as you sign up. And then I believe you have to contact them. Adriana, I don't know if you went through a different process. That's what it was for us about 3 years ago. I don't know if it's changed. But yeah, at the time we just signed up and applied that way through them. So yeah, it looks like Santiago is saying the same thing. Yes, thank you, Adriana. That's awesome. She has the full link, good to go. So here's your template. It's super easy to use. And then you can click share right here. You can share it with other people in your organization so that they can edit it. Again, so you don't have to go through this long, arduous process of going back and forth and editing with your teammates. So that's kind of what it looks like. As you can see, it's super quick to put together a one-pager once you kind of know what data you're working with. And I definitely highly encourage everyone to utilize Canva if you can. But the same thing applies to Google Word, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Google Slides. You can get really creative and use a lot of different colors and elements in those programs that you probably already have installed on your computer. So don't be shy. Just because you are not a professional designer doesn't mean you can't do it. I highly encourage everyone to just go for it. So any other questions about making the data shareable before we sort of move on to the programmatic impacts of these microsurveys? Okay, well, again, you didn't miss your chance to ask a question, throw it in the chat. But let's move on to talking about how these micro surveys have impacted our programmatic work at Families Empowered and how they could potentially impact your programmatic work. So we love using micro surveys to work with community partners like you guys. One of the first ways we did this is we surveyed our community and we asked, besides the services that Families Empowered provides to you, what else do you need? Where can we help you? This is what they said. And so we were able to take these results and go to community partners and say, hey, can you share some of your work with us? Can you let us know how to talk to our families about your services so that they can find adult education? Because we've got 28% of parents who say, hey, I need a little bit of help finding adult education information. Or we were able to go to summer camps that had free programs and say, hey, can you share with us this information so we can get it out to our families? We know they want it and need it. And so that's just one of the ways that you can use this type of survey with community collaboration work. So another great question from Amanda in the chat, where are we getting these infographics? Canva. So in that, let's see, we can go back over to it and I will show you. In the elements, you can see there are a lot of different just like stickers, and you can literally search for like, I don't know, if we're talking about schools, and you've got all of these cute little graphics that you can use. And for the most part, anything you're looking at, you can find them and they'll match. So Canva. So yeah, we use this in community collaboration a lot. Like I said, the first way we did this is by just asking our families, what do you need? There are other ways to do this. We also frequently will partner with other organizations who are working towards the same or a similar goal as us in understanding families. And we say, hey, we'll include a question that works for you and your organization if you'll help us distribute this survey. And then you're working really collaboratively. We share all of our data with everybody because we by nature are a collaborative organization and we want what's best for our families. And so if our surveys can help inform the work of another organization, we're all for it. So, one of the ways that we took this data by going to community partners outside of our own organization is we ultimately ended up having an in-person meeting with all of our partners, and we just sat down and talked, how can we better serve families? And all of that was facilitated by this first micro survey where we simply ask parents, besides our services, what else do you need? So it's a really powerful tool when it comes to community organizing and community partner collaboration. And I definitely encourage working with your partners, working with maybe new organizations that you've never worked with before. It's a good way to get your foot in the door there. So this is just a quick rundown of kind of how you can utilize that within different relationships that you have. Not only can you strengthen your existing relationships, you can create new relationships, but also kind of the cherry on top is you could use this work to inform a strategic partnership. And so, you're able to say, okay, well, now that we've learned this, let's work on this new programmatic goal together. And so got a couple questions in the chat. First from Zulian, who is our community partners manager. She is here and I know she'd love to talk to all of you. But we have another question about when a pro user shares a doc with a free user, does that free user have access to the pro elements? The answer is yes and no. So they have access to the elements. When they add them on as a free user, there will be a watermark over it. But when you as a pro user go back into that document, there will be no watermark because you, of course, are a pro user, and you can download then your document, your one pager without the watermark. So they do have access to all of those elements. It's just when they drag them onto the page, there's a little watermark on it. And then another question, do we, at the very least, use an open-ended other? In some cases, yes, it depends on the question. So for example, we have a survey that just ended last week where we were asking parents to tell us what the most important parts of a pre-K or kindergarten program were to them. We included a few options, but we also had other, and they could write in. And we got, I would say, a decent amount of write-ins. So depending on the question, we do offer an other where they can just write in something different if we didn't think of it. Yes. Yeah, so you can create a team within Canva if you need it. Our team is so small that we in terms of like marketing and creative that we don't. But if your organization is a little bit bigger, you can. So, talking about micro surveys in terms of programmatic goals, these micro surveys can be expanded to become multi-tiered projects. And so that is typically how Families Empowered utilizes them. And so you start with 3 questions, and this turns into an entire stream of strategic work that can span months. So an example of this is a digital survey that we did in June 2020. So, kind of like right in smack dab in the middle of that pandemic and all of the shutdowns. And so we were asking parents, how are you feeling about next year? After we got that data, we turned it into a 1-pager, which is everything we've just done in this session. But then we expanded upon that. We called all of our survey respondents to ask them about a micro grant. And we did that in partnership with another organization who said, hey, we're really curious, if we give money to parents, what will they use it for? We also had some of our own questions that we did in this phone survey. And so we really did that by so this group that we called, we took all of the data from this side of things, from the actual survey, we broke them out into a group, and we called a select sample so that you know that these are a really engaged sample. They're going to answer the phone when you call, is the important part, so that your phone results are really impactful. And then from there, we got a second set of data from our phone survey, because those 3 questions, like we talked about earlier, there's always more to learn. There's always more to know. And you always want to get that sort of qualitative side of things. So that's what we do with our phone surveys, is we say, okay, talk to me. Tell me a little bit more about it. And so, yeah, Adrian is curious to know, are we asking identifying information? How do we know who's responding? Yes, for all of our surveys, we ask for a name and a phone number, and sometimes email address, depending on the survey and what we're doing with it. And so, yes, typically we are asking for contact info. And also with Families Empowered, like I said, most of our survey respondents are already in our database. We're talking to our existing community, so we do have contact info for them, but we always ask for it again just in case their phone number has changed, because it's also a really great opportunity to upgrade your records just in case, something has changed. So we do typically always ask that sort of like basic those like basic things. So we ended up with, we've got another question. Do we have suggestions for questions? Yes. If you will email me, we can definitely connect offline, and I'm happy to help, work through some questions in terms of that. Super happy to collaborate on that one. So after our phone survey, we ended up with a second set of data, which was really rich data, really interesting data. And one of the things we found out was that 97% of the people we talked to, this like overwhelming sample of the people we talked to, said that they would use a micro grant. And then we broke it down and said, okay, what would you use it for? Overwhelmingly tutoring and materials, and then some said therapies. So for kids that typically would have like speech therapy, things like that, parents were needing access to funds to do that while schools were closed. So we took that, we called that 97% of families that said, right, so we were only calling people that were interested in this programmatic work, and we let them know, hey, there's a letter that's going on to Congress right now asking for micro grants to help this. And would you like to sign the letter? But by the way, do you want to share your story with us? Tell us what's going on with you, because an overall goal of Families Empowered as an organization is to elevate parent voices. So this was a really great opportunity for us to get very specific parent stories and family stories and be able to share those stories out and let people know what the impact is. What that turned into was we ended up getting over 100 parent stories and more than 70 letters to Congress just from that first micro survey. And so we were able to complete a huge Families Empowered overall organizational goal and get a ton of parent stories that we, were able to share out and, let people know what's really going on. And so that's just kind of one of the ways that you can utilize microsurveys to impact longer goals that you have for your organization. They can be a starting point, and they can help you to identify the parts of your community that might be best for those projects because they're the most engaged for whatever it is that you're trying to do. Here's another example of our recent work. So, as I mentioned, right now we are working on understanding pre-K and kinder enrollment because we kind of all know that it's down a little bit. So, in January, we launched a survey. Here's a little sneak peek of the data we're going to be releasing. This is not all of it, it will release next week. And then what we're going to do from there, follow up with those people again so that we can create a campaign that speaks to the struggles that they're having with enrollment. So we really do utilize all of our micro surveys in terms of larger programmatic goals. And so that is everything I have prepared for you all, but I'm definitely happy to answer any other questions that you think of. My email address is on the screen, but I'm actually going to type it into the chat so that you can copy and paste it because I understand that my last name is not the easiest to spell in the world. So I will put that into the chat so that y'all can copy and paste it. Definitely happy to work through your surveys with you offline, but I'd love to hear any other questions that anyone has. Okay, maybe people are typing. If you do think of anything, please do shoot me an email. I would be really happy to connect with any of you offline. I know that Zuliana is here, and I know she would also love to connect with any of you offline as well in terms of community partnership. Like I said, I recognize a lot of you that we've worked with before, but a lot of you that we haven't. So we would definitely love to connect. Okay, I will stop my share now, and we can chat if anybody has anything to chat about.
Great. I know as people are maybe thinking of their questions or typing their questions feverishly into the chat, thank you so much. This has just been so informative. I really loved like the hands-on aspect of this presentation of doing the survey, the micro survey, and just showing how you can compile those results and then share the results. I think that sharing and communicating the results back to our constituents, to our clients is sometimes something that we don't do as often as we would like. And so I love how you just made it so user friendly. And I'm sure Canva is going to see a spike in their Houston subscriptions. And we will thank you and Adriana for y'all's ambassadorship of Canva. So thank you guys so much. And please, any other questions? I know there were great questions throughout, so I'm glad people were able to ask that and engage.
I'm
Awesome.
sorry.
Well, yeah.
How do you pronounce your name?
Yes, my name is Ayla Degenpour.
Dagenpour. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely not as scary as it looks. Lots of G's and H's, but they're mostly silent.
Hi, I do have a question. This is Yvonne with MAM. I'm kind of late to the meeting because I had a previous meeting, but I was just curious. So do you think that the surveys, if we retailer them to look like what you're referring to, can maybe encourage people to respond, whereas maybe they didn't respond to other surveys?
Yeah, I think that doing a little bit of testing and looking at your previous surveys to figure out what didn't work, kind of like why people weren't responding. The first place that I always go when that happens to us is the marketing and distribution channel. I look at what we're asking and then try and rethink, okay, is this the best distribution channel for the people we're trying to reach? That's always my first step personally, is looking at marketing and distribution channel. But reformatting to make it easier made a huge difference for Families Empowered. Making it shorter, way more to the point, where we're not taking up valuable time from families that are working and trying to get dinner on the table and trying to help with homework and everything that goes into a typical day for a family. Really did increase our response rate greatly. So even just knocking down your number of questions can help.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's the three that really attracts me to the micro survey. And I even just dropped our feedback form for coffee and quality, because I know some people are needing to hop off, but so we can get your feedback. And it's not a micro survey, but I definitely, try to think of like what's the least amount of info I can ask, but I can still kind of use that information to help us craft coffee and quality and improve it as we go throughout. But I definitely would be looking at creating a micro survey for coffee and quality feedback. So that's coming shortly. But thank you. Yeah. Great question, Yvonne.
I have a question. My name is Stephanie Lopez from
Thank
Christian
you.
Community Service Center. First, this is extremely impressive, particularly how thorough you all are in terms of analyzing your data and reporting it out. As you've kind of been on this process, how have you, I guess, reoriented how you spend your staff time to prioritize this work? Because we know that it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, so it starts with creating a microsurvey lead, which for our team is me. And so I own the project, and I reach out to my colleagues when I need their support, which typically comes in the form of asking them to help me tweak the questions, and then asking them to look over the one pager before we release it out, make sure that it jives with our whole organizational strategy. And we also have a schedule that has been huge. So we release a survey every other month. So we kind of just know it's on the calendar. Okay, we're going to have a micro survey in January. That means we need to craft the questions in December. Ayla is going to be emailing me to ask help with this. So having it on the schedule and kind of planning out and knowing, okay, we're going to be doing these, helps people to just kind of expect, okay, Ayla's going to need my help with this. And we have started deciding on topics when we create our marketing plan for the year. So we have 6 topics queued up, ready to go at the beginning of the year, but we give ourselves flexibility to say, okay, this topic we originally planned for September doesn't work anymore because things have changed. We need to come up with a new topic. So we do give ourselves the flexibility that we're not locked into those topics, but we have them planned out just in case it's a busy month and we say like, okay, we know we were going to do this. Let's just do it.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, there's a question in the chat. Best time to send surveys. Depends on your audience. I wish there was more of a one size fits all answer here. For us specifically, Saturdays work really well, or midday around lunchtime when people are on lunch breaks and they can just they're eating their sandwich or whatever and they can just scroll through, tap, tap, tap. But Saturdays kind of later in the morning are a really sweet spot for us. But it's going to kind of depend on your community. If you have any analytics when it comes to like your email newsletters maybe that you're doing or any other text message blasts that you're doing, I would start there and just kind of tweak as you move forward. And that's just another thing that we have learned kind of throughout the pandemic is that we pretty much do everything around lunchtime, everything that goes out to parents. Lunchtime's a good time for them, but not on a Monday or a Friday. Monday, usually they're just like, I gotta get the kids set up on Zoom again, that kind of thing. That just has worked best for us throughout the past year. Can we place a survey on a timer to be sent out? So question from the chat. So once you create a survey in Google Forms, it's just going to live there forever and you decide when you make it public or not public. But unless somebody has the link, they can't get to it. So depending on your distribution channel, you can definitely time it. You can set an email to go out. You can build the email and then set it to go out for whatever day. Like you could build it on Monday and set it to go out for that Saturday. And same thing depending on your text message capabilities. So in terms of the Google Form side of things, once you make it public, it's public, but no one can of course get to it unless they have the link. Do we always use our brand colors? Yes. So, yes, that is my big thing. And I always notice if somebody uses the wrong orange. By the way, to my team members that are on this, I know when you do it. Um, but I am the director of marketing communications, so I know all of our brand colors by heart. So, yeah, we always use our brand colors when making our surveys and all of our content. It's what that does is it keeps it cohesive. So even though we have different elements, right? Like sometimes we have a little book and sometimes we have building blocks or whatever it is in terms of element or design that we have, the brand colors keep it consistent so that people know it's coming from us after a while. Another just like little thing that we do is we use a lot of geometric shapes. So you'll see that repeated throughout all of our work are the circles because that is a main element of our logo. And so that is just like a subconscious branding marketing thing that we do. We include a lot of circles on all of our materials because it's specific to our brand. So if you've got like leaves or sprouts or some other sort of like element in your logo, I definitely encourage using that when you're building your one pagers, just to keep it flowing and get people to subconsciously start recognizing you.
I love all the pro tips you're just sharing and dropping with everyone. Thank you. This is great. I think we're about 10 minutes out to 10:30. Are there any other questions? I know she shared her email, so if you want to connect with her after the fact, she's open to that. We'll also share the handout, the slide deck, and we are recording right now, so we'll be able to have this as a resource and be able to rewatch it or share it with other members of your team so everybody can get on the micro survey train at your agency. Okay, so if I'm not seeing any more questions, I will again, let's give a big virtual round of applause. One more question.
Yes, sometimes we do get surprised by the data. Definitely sometimes families come back and they tell us something opposite than what we were expecting. It doesn't happen all the time, but every now and then, yeah, we'll get a response and we'll say, "Oh, really? Okay." But even when that doesn't happen, it's nice to be able to go back to funders, the media, supporters, and say, "Remember that thing we told you? Here's some actual data to back it up." But yeah, every now and then we get something kind of weird. Favorite insight that we found from the surveys that we didn't think of beforehand. Honestly, I would just say that in terms of this is just something that we know at Families Empowered because it has become a recurring theme, but something that I had never thought of before I came to Families Empowered is that parents who are resource constrained are just as picky as any other parent in the market. And so we have data that shows, and this is kind of just like my favorite thing because it's one of those that's like, well, duh, but you don't necessarily think of it. We have data that shows that parents who are resource constrained won't just go to a school because it's free. They want you to show them the academics are good. They want you to show them that there are after school programs that pertain to their children. They are just as picky in every way, shape, and form. And so they want all of the same options. And it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh, duh, of course, but you don't always think of it that way when you're outside of that community.
Great. I love those two last minute questions. So let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. We are really just so thankful. And so we will, just ask for everyone to just continue to help us craft our coffee and quality sessions, make sure they're fitting your needs and we're having information that's, beneficial to you guys. We have our feedback form, but then we also have our next session. So our next session is on May 6th, same time, same Zoom channel, maybe a different meeting room and password, but that's for later. The topic will be CQI, so continuous quality improvement best practices. So we're really excited for that session to really talk more about what are some best practices for using continuous quality improvement within your agencies and within your programs. So again, thank you all so much. If you're going to get 6 minutes back, which is gold in this time that we're in right now. So again, please, Ayla, thank you so much. Thank you to Families Empowered for sharing all of this with us. We just are really very thankful.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for all the questions, everyone. They were great.
Thank you.